Saudi Arabian security officials have told German media that they'd warned Berlin 3 times about the man who drove a car into crowds at the Christmas market in Magdeburg in eastern Germany. At least 5 people, including a child, have been killed in the attack. 200 people were injured. The suspect is a 50-year-old doctor who arrived in Germany in 2006 from Saudi Arabia and was a prolific user of social media. Hans-Jakob Schindler from the Counter-Extremism Project joins us this morning. Hans-Jakob, good morning.
Good morning.
Very good to speak to you. First of all, then, what do you make of the reporting this morning that that Saudi Arabia warned Germany of the risks that this man seemingly posed? Does that sound like something that is a standard operating procedure, if you like?
From my own personal experience working for a security authority in Germany, I can tell you any warning from a foreign service is always taken quite seriously. But what the Saudis are not saying is exactly what and when did they warn about this individual? Did they warn about this individual because he was a very vocal, very quite known critic of the Saudi regime who helped people to, in inverted commas, what he says, flee from Saudi Arabia? So were they warning of a dangerous criminal in their eyes who may traffic human beings out of Saudi Arabia? Or did they say this human being will in a couple of weeks conduct a terror attack in Germany? That's still the question. But it's also clear from the details that are now emerging that the layers of security that you have in any society, the intelligence service, the police, the community then who organized the Christmas market, there were holes like slices of Swiss cheese. And as always in these tragic incidents, these holes aligned and enabled that attack. So was the security assessment of 2023 that said at that time the individual was not dangerous, which was done by the security forces, why was it not repeated in 2024? Why were these warnings, including from some members of the public about this individual, not taken more seriously? Why was there a gap in the physical security protection of the Christmas market that allowed a car to enter? All of these incidents have to align to allow this attack. And there is going to be a lot of reworking on both the security concepts, but also on our layers of security in Germany that are designed to prevent such attacks.
One of the suggestions is that the gap in the security bollards was left so that emergency service vehicles could make it through in the event of an emergency. Is it time to consider that actually that can't be? You can't leave a gap that is the size of a vehicle.
Well, if the assumption is you wouldn't leave a gap. Yes, of course, there needs to be an emergency road. We had incidents of mass events where had people crushed to death. The Love Parade a couple of years ago in North Rhine-Westphalia is the case in point. But yes, you have to have an opening, but why not put a police car on that opening? If there's an emergency, you will need police anyway, and you block that way rather than with a heavy concrete physical barrier. So there are improvements that can be made.
There is a kind of growing feeling around these warnings. It's reported in the Sunday Times, reported by the BBC, reported by CNN, that these warnings stretch back as far as 2007. And CNN says officials in Saudi Arabia were concerned at the suspect's radical views of varying kinds, including criticising Islam. Is there any feeling here that the German authorities didn't respond because they were fearful in any way of responding to these reports? I'm thinking particularly of the political situation around immigration and people moving to Germany. Would that be a factor in decision-making? Does the politics get in the way of this?
Well, I would first argue in 2007 is 8 years before 2015, before this migration issue became such a very difficult political topic. Yeah. And secondly, Saudi Arabia warning of a critic of Saudi Arabia and Islam is not something that I would think is a very unusual occurrence. That doesn't mean that that individual is conducting an attack 8 years later, 9 years later, right? So again, we will have to look at what went wrong, because you cannot argue that things went good if there's an attack. But whether the warning from Saudi Arabia was the one silver bullet, had that been dealt with in a different way, the attack may be prevented. There are other elements as well.
Yeah. In terms of the other elements then, let's turn to them as a kind of security and counter-terror consideration. One expert that we've heard from here, from King's College London, wrote, if anything, the Magdeburg attacker was far right, a self-declared Islam-hating ex-Muslim atheist who despised German society, not for being against Islam, but facilitating its spread. He also very much likes the AfD. Hans-Jakob, what is your analysis of the profile that we're building of this man?
Yeah, look, I mean, clearly he doesn't fall very neatly in one of the very established categories. He's definitely not an Islamist. Is he really right-wing? He called himself a left-winger. He falls into what is most best described by salad bar ideology, something that really emerged after the COVID pandemic, where a lot of social life, including a lot of weird social life, moved online on social media. And the way these platforms are constructed enabled them, the algorithm promoting that kind of content, enabled conspiracy theories not only to spread far more widely and entrench themselves far more deeply with some parts of the population, but also for people to radicalize with elements of various ideologies, but nevertheless being very dangerous. So there is even a term in the German domestic intelligence services called the delegitimizers, those who for whatever reason, fundamentally reject the German system. So if there's any categorization possible of this particular perpetrator, who's also about 3 times as old as all of the other perpetrators that we've seen in Europe in the last couple of years, they were getting younger, as young as 13, 15-year-olds. If there's any category where he may just about fit in, it is that delegitimizer salad bar ideology category. And it shows that you don't have to adhere to one of the quote-unquote classic categories. Once you radicalize beyond a certain point for some individuals, that unfortunately inevitably leads to violence.
Yeah. How effective, Hans-Jakob, is the German system for de-radicalizing? Is there a formal program? Just explain to us, if somebody is flagged by the authorities as potentially being radicalized, posing a possible risk in any of the ways that we're talking about, how effective is the state at intervening?
Well, I mean, we have a little bit of a different system that you have in the UK. So
Sure.
the town or community is not the one that needs to flag those individuals. There are, of course, organizations that de-radicalize Islamists, that de-radicalize right-wing extremist guys. We've not really been good in establishing a system that addresses this kind of salad bar ideology. You know, in Germany, everything has to have an order and needs to have a good category in the way that we deal with these things. And these people fall in between. But I like to point out, the social media and internet sphere is full of individuals that have really weird ideas, have fantasies of violence, hundreds of thousands of millions. What we really also need is a reckoning why we continue to exempt these social media platforms, who some of them belong to the most profitable companies in human history, from any kind of responsibility that we would expect from any other industry that brings a product to the market. Why have they no legal responsibility for the content? Why are they not legally required to proactively work with the security authorities? After all, the French authorities had to arrest the CEO of Telegram to get some cooperation on child pornography. So we actually seen over the last couple of years, despite regulations coming in, including in the UK, Germany, and the EU for these companies, their cooperation is actually getting, worse. X, for example, where a lot of this material of this perpetrator had been posted, has essentially in America fired all of its content moderators.